I'm in front of some public art in Bedok Reservoir Park. You can see behind me over my shoulder an enclosed space that used to hold a bit of the Berlin Wall with some graffiti on it. And this that I'm stood next to is a bit of public art that's supposed to embody the Berlin Wall. And it's coming down. I think it was all erected here in 2015. It doesn't even have a plaque today. It's all pretty much forgotten. I've very rarely visited, and I think it doesn't really have any great significance here in Singapore. I thought of it today because I don't know, it kind of places Singapore within its gentle positioning of geopolitics, in that Singapore doesn't have a hardened position. It has to tread lightly. Its position pretty much is an enemy of none, a friend of all. A small country that literally is the red dot on a map or a globe. It literally appears simply as the red dot below its name, and cannot be seen as an island within the bigger picture, surrounded by Indonesia and Malaysia. Closest known place to the rest of the world for Europe is possibly Thailand, where there is it's at the tip of the Malaysian Peninsula, western Malaysia, which connects to Thailand. It's probably the nearest to it. Okay, so what am I trying to get to? Where does Singapore fit in world global politics? I think, as I say, it's generally the reason why I wanted to bring this up was in the case of Israel and Palestine. Singapore, when it was founded, it needed to train a police force and an army, and it got a lot of its training for its security from Mossad, from Israel. After all, Singapore had to break from Malaysia after Malaysia gained independence from British rule. Singapore gained independence from Britain, which put it into Malaysia, and it was surrounded by Muslim countries, as it were, and in those days there was less stability. After all, Malaysia and Indonesia had just come out of insurrectionary wars with British colonialism, and in the 60s, we had the aftermath of the Second World War and American colonialism across Southeast Asia. Korea had taken place. The Americans had taken over from the British, had taken over from the French as the exit from the Second World War. Then there was Vietnam. Then there was Laos. And, quite frankly, it was just American carpet bombing. And America had established its domination over the region as the battles of national independence had started to take place. British colonialism was collapsing, and America was paranoid about the rise of Soviet power and Chinese nationalism arising, and as the Allies had started to beat back the Japanese imperial forces, they were scared of the Soviets pushing into Japan before they get there, so they firebombed Japan cities, which were predominantly made out of wood, so it was just a tinderbox, to make a fire break with from the Soviets, and then obviously Hiroshima and Nagasaki to send a message. Nothing to do with saving lives, which is the American lie that's been told ever since and accepted by the West and the universities in the historical story. So, that kind of set the message for Southeast Asia as battles of national independence took hold, and we saw with India as well, as British Empire collapsed and American Empire started to rise. Now, in that period, of course, we saw the British had already tried to settle Palestine as a Jewish homeland, and America saw that as a chance to set up a Jewish army of occupation to have the Jewish people fight their wars for them in the Middle East, to hold in place the Arab leadership, which of course they paid for corrupt Arab leaders, and we see the Arab regimes that we see today formed by American oil, which took over where the East India British colonial power army of mercenaries had ruled in India. It's the same sort of mercenary armies that took over. So anyway, Israel became the army of occupation. But for a long time, most of us in the West kind of saw Israel as the liberal democratic balancing force within the Middle East, and we gave them that leeway. But more and more, we started to see what was the role of Israel against the Palestinians, and even right up to the recent genocide against Palestinians this year. There was always a bit too much of much forgiveness given for Israel, and I think that's gone now. And when South Africa took or proposed to the International Courts of Justice or Human Rights or whatever that they should look into the issue of genocide, which is pretty much established, I think, not that the International Courts of Justice has made their ruling, but I think it was last week or so when, after the first stage of the peace arrangements between Israel and Hamas, hostages were released, and now the Israeli president and his ministry, who themselves are already on an arrest list internationally, although they were allowed to address the American Senate or Congress or whatever, and should have been arrested. But overnight, 400 Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, I think it was, but certainly Palestinians, were killed overnight, supposedly, as Israel wanted to restart military actions against the leaders of Hamas. It's just restarting the genocide and the threat to people to move or get out of Gaza, an open call for ethnic cleansing. So I'm thinking, that's why I came here today, to this nearest thing that Singapore has to a landmark, to the changing world order, and to the issues of obeying international order of law, which is going to be so important to Singapore in the future. Recently, the leader of the former president of the Philippines was arrested, and taken to the international courts, I think in Den Haag, in the Netherlands. He's charged with ordering and leading the Philippines rounding up an execution, murdering, shoot to kill policy or whatever it was, of drug gangs in the Philippines without judicial process, just execution of drug leaders. And of course he was claiming he had popular support for it. Now that's exactly what the President of America, Donald Trump, is claiming, that he has some sort of when America's at war, right to do is to simply to arrest and deport drug gangs in America without due process to the law, without having any proof that anybody was involved in a drug gang, just rounding up people of a certain ethnicity with tattoos or whatever, and saying, we believe these people are, we're making claims these people are part of a gang, and throwing them off to, deporting them off to a country that they're paying to have them put into vile, nasty prisons. And he's totally, and President Trump has totally ignored judicial processes and putting people's lives at risk. Now, that's not as bad as a shoot-to-kill policy. Thaksin in Thailand had a kill policy. It was proven that there's been kill policies in Northern Ireland under British rule. And these things have to be held to account. I think we'll find that, like the President of Israel, war crimes are committed, people should be held to account, and should serve time in prison for war crimes, just as the leaders of Bosnia had to do for their genocidal war crimes. I think President Trump will have to serve time, will have to face charges for war crimes, which means he won't, because the more and more that America becomes like a fascist state, maybe it's not a fascist state, but more and more it becomes like a fascist state and runs all over judicial processes, then they will have to break away from recognition of any international courts of international law, if they haven't already. And we'll see more and more dismantling of international rule of law, because America will not want to abide by it. And that's going to make it very hard for countries that are dependent upon it, especially small countries like Singapore. We're seeing that NATO no longer has a role to play, that the defence of small countries within Europe will rely on countries working to defend themselves without the support of America. In Southeast Asia, it's going to become a very similar situation. It will certainly be done without the big bully of America. It will be done, and it'll probably be a safer place for it. So that's why I'm here today. Another reason to be antiseptic.